At the heart of the Settlement Way are three core beliefs, simple in concept, yet profound in impact: respect, reform, and reciprocity. For over 100 years, these three simple ideas have guided the settlement house movement and benefited hundreds of thousands of people. The Settlement Way recognizes that all people are worthy of dignity and respect, regardless of social or economic status. The Settlement Way promotes social reform and democracy by providing training, mentorship, and resources to our neighbors so that they can take action in their communities. The Settlement Way stimulates reciprocity by viewing all of our neighbors as assets who have something valuable to contribute, and by encouraging them to share their talents and strengths with their community. The roots of the Settlement Way lie in the settlement house movement in late 19th century England. The Industrial Revolution brought about significant improvements in technology, transportation, and communication. A massive population movement from rural to urban areas brought about profound changes for workers. For the first time in history, city slums emerged. Thousands of people were living in overcrowded tenements. Disease was rampant and healthcare was scarce. Children worked in unsafe factories. Few received any formal education. The idea of the settlement house movement emerged as a reaction to these conditions. In 1884, Reverend Samuel Barnett and his wife Henrietta established Toynbee-Hall, a building in the middle of the slums of London that provided classes, social gatherings, summer camps, arts programs, clean milk stations, baby clinics, nursery schools, and other innovative programs for the city's poor. For many people, settlement houses provide the first safe, clean, and inviting place they had ever been. It allowed many mothers to go to work for the first time, and countless children made friends, found mentors, and learned skills that they would carry with them for the rest of their lives. Early settlement workers lived on-site, settling in the poorest areas so that they could better understand both the people and the neighborhoods. Together, the workers and community gradually crafted the principles and concepts that became the Settlement Way. The movement grew quickly. During the next 2 decades, 21 settlement houses were established across Europe. It was an optimistic, friendly, personal, and hopeful movement in comparison to the charity visitor who rarely took the time to get to know or understand the poor. Settlement workers knew the neighbors individually and treated them with respect. They were not simply providing handouts. Rather than asking residents, "What can we do for you?" they instead asked, "What can we do together?" building on the notion that social and economic conditions rather than personal weakness were the root causes of poverty. Reverend Barnett understood the importance of personal relationships to create positive change. No social reform will be adequate which does not touch social relations, bind classes by friendship, and pass, through the medium of friendship, the spirit which inspires righteousness and devotion. By the late 19th century, the movement had arrived in America. In 1897, there were 74 settlements in the U.S. By 1910, that number had grown to over 400. Minneapolis's first settlement opened in 1897. Bethel Settlement offered a free kindergarten, industrial training, sewing classes, and a day nursery which allowed mothers to go to work. In 1905, John and Charles Pillsbury donated $40,000 towards the expansion of the settlement. The building, located near the intersection of what is now Cedar and Riverside Avenues, was completed in 1906 and named Pillsbury House in honor of their parents. They added a health clinic, a women's employment office, home economics, and art classes. Dozens of similar organizations emerged throughout the city at the turn of the century. By the late 1920s, settlement houses across the country began to change. Community redevelopment in many inner cities uprooted entire neighborhoods once served by settlement houses. Many settlement houses became financially dependent on the United Fund and community chests rather than private donations. It was no longer viable by the 1930s to support full-time live-in residents and round-the-clock services. Many began calling themselves neighborhood or community centers, and the model of resident staff never returned. At this time, social work was becoming more clinical and professionalized, often focusing on the psychological problems of the individual rather than addressing systemic societal problems. Many social reformers began to speak of those they were helping not as neighbors, but rather as clients. Yet settlement houses differentiated themselves from this brand of social work by remaining loyal to the values of the settlement way. Throughout the 20th century, settlement workers truly got to know their neighbors and provided a space where they could get to know and provide support for each other. They engaged their communities in discussions, activities, classes, and gatherings. They continued to work for social reform by offering resources, support, and connections to decision makers. And they changed as the neighborhoods around them changed, a flexible yet consistent presence in the poorest neighborhoods. The impact of the settlement house movement is widespread. Today, there are thousands of settlement houses throughout the world. You may know them as community or neighborhood centers, but they are all descendants of a movement begun over 100 years ago. The ideas of the settlement house movement were considered radical in the 1800s, and we believe that they are just as challenging for us in the 21st century. We are still facing issues such as economic inequality and a lack of opportunities for the poor, an influx of immigration and refugees, language barriers, the marginalization of the physically and mentally challenged, and religious intolerance. Perhaps the most significant difference between the earlier settlement way and the way Pillsbury United Communities operates today is the shift toward greater involvement of our neighbors in the movement. Pillsbury United Communities is one of the largest settlement-based organizations in the country, with 17 locations throughout the city. Every year, nearly 35,000 people walk through our doors. We understand the importance of bedrock services like after-school programs for kids, childcare, and food shelves. But we also know that vital communities require a wider array of efforts, and so we deliver employment training, supportive housing for homeless families, domestic abuse advocacy for African women, translation services for Hmong people needing health care, tax assistance for the elderly and low-income residents, theater classes for troubled teens, family advocacy for at-risk youth, and many, many other programs. We open our doors to our neighbors and celebrate with them. We host birthday parties, barbecues, block parties, recognition dinners, holiday celebrations, and political forums. At Pillsbury United Communities, we are taking an approach that is very challenging yet critical. That is, we are trying to be big and small at the same time. Big when it comes to community impact and organizational efficiency, but small when it comes to relationships and people. We get to know our neighbors. At the heart of all of these activities are the personal connections we make with them and the connections they make with each other. As we look toward our future as an organization, we find that the basic tenets of the settlement way are still central to our mission. We will continue to show dignity and respect toward our neighbors by developing top-rate facilities, programs, services, and staff. We will promote social reform and democracy by providing training, mentorship, and resources to our neighbors, which will help them take initiative on their own behalf and become engaged owners of their communities. We will vitalize healthy communities by creating, innovating, and collaborating with individuals and groups, bringing people from diverse backgrounds together to share their talents and create an environment of reciprocity and solidarity. The settlement way is alive and well and continues to create healthier communities throughout the world. And at Pillsbury United Communities, we will continue to honor the 3 R's: respect, reform, and reciprocity, to create choice, change, and connection in people's lives, one person at a time.